All right, good morning. Happy Monday. It's the Travis Neville Podcast. I'm Travis Neville. I wrote this book called The Johnson Method. You can get it everywhere. Speaking of books, I did not reinvent the wheel with this thing. I was just thinking about that. I get this question a lot. What were my influences? You know, what made me want to kind of express my thoughts in book form, and I don't, it's kind of weirdly ironic. I'm a former English teacher, and now here I've written and published a book, but I wouldn't consider myself a big reader. Like I watched my parents, and they still do this. That to them is their relaxation time. They sit down and they read a book, and they're just happy as a pig in shit. Like actually grabbing a paperback book to me usually, or a physical book, that's a recipe for falling asleep. Most of the time, if I'm reading an actual book, I'm probably traveling, like on an airplane. I certainly can't read a book when I'm riding in a car, definitely not when you're driving, obviously, but riding, I know I learned this when I was a little kid. If I read when I'm riding in a car, I'll get sick to my stomach and throw up. I'll get motion sick. It's weird, but when I'm stuck in an airport or on an airplane, I generally have a book with me. This last trip, I read, I told you I read the On Forgiveness, the essay from Russell Hassan. That was a good one. But my point is this, like I said, not a big reader. I wouldn't consider myself that. Like I've never considered myself that. But as I was preparing for this podcast, I was looking at all the books that I've read, and a lot of them, more than half of the books we're going to talk about today, I got them on Audible. I'll listen to them when I'm driving. So sometimes when I'm like putting away groceries or working in my garage, I'll listen to a book then too if it's something that I'm really interested in, I'm really into it. I'll listen then, but generally it's on a long drive. Like today, I'm going to head up north, spend some time with some family up there, and it's starting to get warm out. And I've got a couple books that I'm excited to listen to on the way up there. So that's what I'm going to do. But like I said, not usually a big reader, but the stuff that I do read, it just kind of goes to show that I'm not reinventing the wheel here. People have put down their thoughts on basically how to get your shit together in life forever. I mean, since people could write, they've written about the human experience, what fails you and where your doubts are and how to get past that and how to build confidence. And basically the self-help book genre has been around forever. I mean, you could argue, one of the oldest books, the Bible, it's basically here's how you live your life story. I mean, a lot of it is. And like I said, people have been doing that ever since. So I wanted to go over some of the books that have been impactful for me, and maybe they'll help you. So we'll go through those. So the first one I wanted, was that essay by Russell Hassan. By the way, my conversation with this guy is going really well right now. We're going back and forth. He's an interesting guy, so we'll see how that turns out. But you guys, we've gone through that a ton. You know what that's all about. This book, Be the Best at What Matters Most, was one that was given to me by one of my former bosses. And the guy was kind of a douchebag, but he's like, this is going to help you. This is going to help you. And I think, honestly, when I think back about that conversation, he hadn't read it. Somebody told him this was important, so he told me it was important. So I read it, and it was all right. I mean, there were no groundbreaking, things in here that people had never said before. But it's a nice refresher on how to be successful in an office environment, which, that's always been tough for me. I usually don't get along with people that well. This one is Jon Gordon, all right? And that, one of the best compliments I ever got, my buddy's wife was telling me about this guy, and I guess I hadn't connected, because I had read this book before she was telling me about Jon Gordon, and I didn't connect that that's the guy who wrote this book. Anyway, I'm like, well, who is he? She was talking about this Jon Gordon. She's like, well, he's you. And man, I started looking into this guy, and obviously he's wrote some really powerful books, and his social media presence is awesome. It's like one of the most positive guys you've ever seen. Like, he's just real sharp and very motivational, and what a compliment to be, paralleled with this dude. Anyway, this book is awesome. It's probably a 20-minute read. The basis of it is just basically, what do you do? How are you going to handle pressure around you? How do you handle pressure? And it gives you this kind of extended metaphor that, it's helpful. And this is one that, this was actually recommended and given to me by one of the coaches that I work with. Real sharp guy. And then I've sent it out to other coaches and said, hey man, I want you to read this and see what you think. Especially people that I think have the ability, the potential to be a head coach. And that's where the pressure starts, Here's a great one. I mean, this one, I did read it in paperback, and it kept my attention the whole time. It's Pulitzer Prize winner, The Season of Life by Jeffrey Marks. I quote this book in my book. He talks in here. Basically, it's a young guy who's a kid, and he gets the opportunity to work with this professional football team. And then later, when he's older, he ends up reconnecting with one of the players from that professional football team who is now coaching a high school football team. And he hangs out with this team for a season of life. And you just learn a ton about life again. Great stuff. And like I said, Joe Ehrman is the name of the guy, the football player, who he basically follows around for that season. Interesting guy, impressive guy, older guy in the book. I contrast him with Jack Donovan, and anyway, it functions pretty well. I'm never gonna find that quote. Shit, it's buried in here. Anyway, I use a quote from that book in my book, and it's good. This is not only got some life lessons, but it's actually entertaining. It's an entertaining read. So that's a good one. This is not really this is not your orthodox self-help book, but if you haven't read The Catcher in the Rye, you're going to miss out on a lot of kind of social, cultural references. The main character, Holden Caulfield, is a real sarcastic, very intelligent, like high school student. He's in this private high school, and the story is basically about him getting kicked out of school and killing time. He gets kicked out right before Christmas break, and he's got to kill a bunch of time before he goes home, because if he gets home early, his parents are going to know he got kicked out of another school. But his perspective on life and the way that he looks at things, super interesting. I laugh every time I read it. Salinger's brilliant. The dialogue is what makes it good. I mean, that's what makes him a good writer. There's lines in this book that pop into my head constantly. And, from a psychology perspective, you realize that the whole time that he's kind of traveling, and it's days and days, it's a few days in a row he's traveling, he never sleeps. So I don't know if the title of bipolar existed at that time, but I would say this guy's manic as shit. Like, and at the end, he's telling the story from the perspective of being in like a not a loony bin, but like a place. He says, since I got run down and had to come to this place to relax, so he's in like a hospital of some sort, and that's kind of the perspective where he's telling the story from. So yeah, I think he's bipolar looking back, and it's interesting. It's an interesting kind of character analyzation. It's great. And this copy, obviously I've had for a long time. It actually belonged to my buddy Eric's dad, who was a great dude. He died a few years ago. He was real quiet. I don't feel like I knew him that well, but I knew of him, and nice guy. So it's kind of cool that I have his copy of Catcher in the Rye. Kind of neat. The other books that, and I'd say these are the ones that are probably more impactful These are the ones that I listen to rather than seeing. First one, 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. I talk about Peterson all the time. He's fucking brilliant. He just released another new book. I bought his first book. He's got 3 now. 12 Rules for Life is his second one. The first one is called Maps of Meaning, and it's a fucking textbook. Like, I tried reading that shit. It was so goddamn dense. Like, you just can't get anything. Like, it was too dense for me. I couldn't really get anything out of it. 12 Rules for Life is much more palatable for your average Joe, I guess. But, it's great stuff. He talks about, always pet a cat when you see one. So each of the 12 habits, 12 rules, they're not, like mine, they're not clearly stated for what they really are. He just kind of uses an example, and then you can turn it into what you want it to be. He says, don't ever interrupt or stop kids from playing on their skateboards. And the concept behind that is pretty simple. You need to learn that you can fall down, and it's not going to hurt that bad. And he talks about helicopter parenting and all these things that are just terrible for kids. But, go out there and fall down. Skin up your knees. Get back up. Realize that it's okay. It doesn't hurt that bad to fall. And so it's nothing to be afraid of. I mean, and there's such a big lesson there, of course. Take some chances, take some risks, start a business. Do some great things if you can, and don't be afraid of falling down. I mean, being afraid of shit, that's rule number 1. Beat fear. So a lot of parallels between his stuff and my stuff. Amazingly, obviously he came first, and I liked his stuff. But one that I'm still working on right now, it's super interesting. I talk about politics sometimes. This book is called Hate Incorporated, Hate Inc. It's by a guy named Matt Taibbi, and that's the book that he's a journalist. I think he worked for Rolling Stone, and what he's talking about is how the media has made so much money off of polarizing us as a population over the Trump shit, essentially. Polarizing us. The more they get us to hate each other, the more money they make. Essentially, it's a great book. He's got a ton of arguments and a bunch of examples, and it's a great read. I'm enjoying it. I'm not done with it yet. Still going on that. I actually interrupted that one because I had a guy that I coach with who recommended that I look into this guy named Simon Sinek, Sinek, and I've talked about him earlier. I talked about him in the You're a Drug Addict podcast, and I read his book called Leaders Eat Last, and that's the one he dug in pretty deeply on those brain chemicals, and that's what got me thinking about it. But that's a good one. He basically talks about how to organize an organization, how to get people to be bought in and to enjoy what they're doing and to be as productive as they can. It's a great leadership book. Obviously, Leaders Eat Last. And it just talks about the difference between a good leader and a bad leader. Great stuff. I recommend that. Like, for me, that made sense because of the football stuff that I do. That's the only leadership stuff that I'm involved in anymore. I don't work anywhere that requires me to be a leader. I don't really do anything else. But for football's sake, that was a great read, and I enjoy it. That was Mike Diener, coach that I work with, recommended that. Thanks, Mike. Excuse me. I read Dan Crenshaw's book, Fortitude. I was a little disappointed in some of the stuff. I should have known this going in. This guy's a pretty damn extreme right-winger. Really impressive guy, don't get me wrong. He's a former Navy SEAL, worked his ass through a bunch of shit. He's only got one eye. He should be completely blind. That happened, he was on a SEAL mission. He's now, I think he's a senator out of Texas. High character guy, very disciplined. He's the kind of character person that I would vote for sure. But his book, he just kind of went over the edge on the right wing stuff a little too much. I mean, he had a giant section on religion and Jesus and all this, and that's not my thing. So that disappointed me. And he does spend a lot of time hating on the left. I don't know, just a little overboard on that stuff. I wanted to hear more about his life and how he got where he is and what his philosophies are, and there wasn't enough of that in my mind. But great book, though. I enjoyed it. Certainly was entertaining. I read Jocko Willink's book. It's called Extreme Ownership. I think he's got a couple of them. I think I've read 2 of his books. But Jocko Willink, another former Navy SEAL, he's a really impressive guy. He, if you follow his Instagram page, which I recommend, basically every morning you're going to get a picture of his wristwatch, and it's going to say like 4:37 a.m. like every day. Like he gets up at the ass crack of dawn and he works out like crazy. And he posts pictures of the sweat pool from underneath where he was working out. He's a badass. And the book Extreme Ownership is kind of based around, like, it's kind of half and half. He'll tell this story about some shit that happened in like war type stuff, like it was a Navy SEAL mission. And then right after that will be another, I don't know if you want to call it a chapter, but him talking about being in a business environment where it's the lessons that he learned in that war situation completely translate into this business situation. So I like that, the way that it's structured. It was interesting in that way. I think he and his partner, his buddy, that's how they're business consultants. They go out and they fire up CEOs and vice presidents and shit like that and get them all fired up and change their business dynamics and get their organizations running in a more efficient manner. That's what they do. So the way they used the war to do anyway, it was well written and well organized in that way, and that impressed me. Another book I liked was one. It was written by Aubrey Marcus. He's one of the owners. Between him and Joe Rogan, he and Joe Rogan, they own Onnit, which I'm wearing my Onnit shirt right now. It's a performance supplement company. I get some stuff from there. They make some pretty good protein bars. They make like a green tea that I like, or a chai tea that I like. They make a few things that I like, and this shirt fits really well, so I bought their shirt too. But his book, Own the Day, Own Your Life, Aubrey Marcus wrote it. He goes through it, basically how he runs his day. And it's not terribly dissimilar to what I do. He's not a little more. This guy is straight up fucking crystals and hippie shit. Like he's, statues and seances and fucking like this guy is super spiritual in that way. That's what you're going to get out of that one. Own your day, own your life. The one, I try to pick something or maybe 2 things out of every book that I read that are going to make me better. And the thing I took from Aubrey Marcus is that I drink a quart of water when I get up every morning. I actually give him credit for that in my book, that I talk about doing that, and I give him props for that. Another one, classic, Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. This is pretty neat. It's a guy who he was dying, and he basically wrote down all of his thoughts and the things, the wisdom that he had gained in his years without any intention of ever publishing it. He just wanted to be able to give it to his sons. I think that's the story that I read there, that his kids, he wanted his kids to not have to lose the advantage of him even though he was dying. So it's brilliant. It's a ton of statements about life and how to do this right, how to do that right, don't fuck that up. And it's just a bunch of statements. And like I said, I love the purity of it. He wasn't trying to make it popular or make it so that everybody would like it. He just wanted to write the shit down so that his kids could have it. Brilliant stuff. And that's a popular book. It's not very long. It's real short. I thought I had that one in paperback at some point. Maybe not. But it's not very long. And you see it in popular culture all the time. And there's a Denzel Washington movie. No, maybe it's not Denzel Washington. Maybe it's Antonio Banderas. Anyway, he's walking around he's carrying this book through the whole movie, and he's constantly reading parts of it. And So you'll see it all over the place. It's worth your time to read it, and it's not very long. But good stuff in there. I also read David Goggins' book. People call him the toughest man in the world. He's the guy that I think he currently still holds the world pull-ups record. It's the most. You got 24 hours. How many pull-ups can you do in 24 hours? He tried to get it like 3 times in a row, and he finally got it. Got the record. The guy runs like 100-mile races, 200-mile races. Also a Navy SEAL. Interesting. I don't want to give away too much of it, but the guy had just a fucked up past. Like, it sounds like his dad was a real fucking cock, and him dealing with that was tough, and that's, for him. I'm sorry you had this terrible fucked up background, but that created your demons, bro, and your demons are what made you so fucking tough, or what make you have to accomplish all these things that you've accomplished. I'm glad my life's not that fucked up. I had this conversation the other day with one of the coaches. Hey, man, impressive guy, but thankfully my life wasn't that bad, so I'm never going to accomplish the shit he's accomplished because I don't feel like I have to. I don't have anything to compensate for like this guy does. He runs stupid long races. He's constantly looking for other challenges. Last I checked on him, I think he's a couple years older than I am. He's like 45, 46. Last I heard about him, he was a smoke jumper. Like, that's what he wanted to do. He made a ton of money on his book because he got onto Joe Rogan, and now you're going to sell every fucking copy of your book that was ever written. And he made a ton of money, but the guy still lives in a small house. He's got a cheap car, and he's got all the money he needs, so he just looks for new challenges and runs a social media page and inspires people. He's an impressive guy. At one point, I caught him doing this rant, something about race in America, and I actually called him out on it because it was inflammatory. Like, he was getting people all fired up, and in my mind, he was making the problem worse. And I wrote to him, said, listen, man, you're part of the problem at this point. Like it or not, you're a leader. You have to, it's your responsibility to calm shit down and to try to fix shit. And I don't know if he sees the world that way or not. I don't think he even responded to me. I can't remember if he did or not. But anyway, that's David Goggins, impressive guy. He wanted to be a Navy SEAL, and he went into his recruiter, and he had to lose 104 pounds in not a very long amount of time, in like 90 days, I think it was. And he did it so that he could get in and become a SEAL. Impressive guy, there's no doubt about that. So those are some of the books, like I said, that have inspired me, that have caught my attention, that I think are worthwhile for you to read for various reasons. Some of them are entertaining. Most of them have great information. For me, that's what I'm always looking for in a book. I mean, it has to have something about it that's a little entertaining to keep your attention. Kind of has to have that sauce on it, but I need the information. I want to know that, I want to read some shit that is interesting to me. I want some information. And most of these have that. Now, all of that said, like I said, these are all basically self-help books for the most part. I mean, Catcher in the Rye isn't, some of them kind of are. They're all going to give you things that are going to make your life a little better if you look into them deeply enough sometimes. But by far, the piece of literature that has impacted me more consistently and more regularly than anything else in my whole adult life it's not a book, it's a poem. It's so important to me. This is my list. Like, I've kept a clipboard since I was a teacher, and it's organized for me. I just put shit on there that I need to get done, cross it off as I do it. That's how I stay fucking kind of organized from day to day. But on the back of this clipboard, I have a copy of the poem If by Rudyard Kipling. And this one, I was in undergrad, and I was in I think it was my Shakespeare class, and a dude that was in there with me, his name was Jason Larson. He recommended this poem, not specifically to me, but he talked about it to the whole class. And I went and read it at that point, and it really impacted me then. And every time I read it now, it impacts me just as much. I mean, that's fucking 20 some years ago, and it's never not had power for me. I'll give you a little bit of it. It's the poem's called If, and it starts out, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting or being lied about, don't deal in lies. Like, basically it says, if you can do all these things, and it goes through all of them, like, it's every one of them is, if you can do this, 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 if you can do this. If you can do all of these things, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. That's how he ends it. So it's, in a 4-stanza poem, he basically lays out, here's how you be successful as a man or as an adult, really. It's really impressive stuff. It's every time I read it, like I said, at some point I have come across each of these in my life, sometimes more than once. If you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools. Yeah. Or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop and build them up with worn out tools. Yeah, I mean, that right there, that speaks to, like, failing, fucking up. Like, you built this awesome thing. I think about my teaching career. That was a thing that I gave my life to that, and it was broken, and I had to stoop and build my life back up with the worn out tools. Yeah, I mean, it's got everything that you need, and it keeps you, it keeps your perspective right. You know what I mean? If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they're gone. Yeah, it's a good one. I actually quoted part of that. I mean, it was an obscure quote. I quoted a couple of start again at your beginnings. I put that in my in the book, and that's in here. I want to make sure I got something from this, but I didn't want to go too deeply into it. But I really recommend this. Like I said, that's if you're a parent, especially if you have a son and you don't have this shit hanging on the wall in his bedroom, I think you're remiss. That's a thing that I think every boy should be reading and every man should continue to read. It's quality shit. It's going to make your life better. It's going to give you some perspective. And I mean, Rudyard Kipling, not known as a poet. I mean, he wrote the Jungle Book, and he was involved in World War I, and he had a huge life outside of this poem. But this poem, in my mind, is the most powerful thing he ever did, and he did a lot of big things. So anyway, that's different pieces of literature that have helped me, that have impacted me, have influenced me, have inspired me. A lot of this stuff you've heard in these podcasts. I'll get, like I said, I've used On Forgiveness. I talked about that a lot. The Leaders Eat Last. I talked about that quite a bit. I talk about Peterson all the time. What I find is that these books, they kind of sharpen my perspective, my opinions. I'll read these things and they get me thinking down a certain line. They get me thinking about a certain topic, and it'll inspire me to research further on that topic, and then you guys get the advantage of that. Like, I'll end up talking about it. The two books that I have not read yet that are in my Audible that I'm going to listen to, if I can get through both of them on the way up north and back. One is Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Frederick Zarathustra. Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Friedrich Nietzsche. Peterson talks about Nietzsche a lot. I figure I better fucking dig into that. So excited about that. And then one of the things that the dude who Russell Hassan talked about in our conversation so far, he said that he is a libertarian, but he's not a Rothbardian libertarian. but his friends are, or vice versa. I can't remember what it was, but so I looked it up. Who the fuck is Rothbard? It's Murray Rothbard is the guy. He wrote a book called For a New Liberty. I'm going to read that too. It's about libertarianism. Super interesting. I'll share what I learned. But those two books are ones that I'm going to dig into here in the next couple days. Hopefully they'll be interesting and I can get some good shit out of that. But so there it is. Some of the shit that I've read, some of the shit that has inspired me. I recommend all of them. If I don't, I told you. My name's Travis Neville. This is the Travis Neville Podcast. I wrote this book called The Josman Method. Like I said, not reinventing the wheel. It's talking about, hey, here's how you get through difficult shit. Here's how you get through your life. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Audible. You can get it from my publisher's website. You can get it at some bookstores. I'm proud of it. My book, I think, is good. I'm proud of it. It took a lot of work. It turned out how I wanted to. But that's it. Travis Neville Podcast. Get your shit together.